G'day mates, it's Busta here, and I would like to give NordVPN a shout out for sponsoring this episode. So as you are all probably well aware of, internet security and freedom is a hot topic these days. And in my opinion, both are incredibly important, especially for any of you guys in Europe who have Article 13 taking effect soon. So, if you're looking for great online security, or want to circumnavigate the effects of global crackdowns on internet freedoms, then NordVPN is perfect for you. NordVPN was selected as the best VPN in the Best VPN Awards for 2019 by one of the most trusted experts, VPN Mentor. And honestly, it's no wonder with super fast servers in 60 countries, an inbuilt ad blocker, double data encryption, extensions built into the Chrome browser, unlimited bandwidth, and even the ability to work in China and more. NordVPN's product is truly the best in the business. So, if you're anything like me, and after listening to countless scary stories involving online stalkers, deep web tracking, and social media scares, and you would like to bolster up your cybersecurity, then sign up to NordVPN like I did. And the best part is that, of course, I got you guys all a nice discount to sign up with. All you have to do is go to nordvpn.org/bbuster, all lowercase, or use the coupon code BBUSTER, and you'll get a whopping 70% off, which comes to $3.49 a month. Plus, you'll get an additional month free. That's nordvpn.org/BEBUSTA, all lowercase, or use the coupon code BEBUSTA at the checkout to get 70% off and an additional month free. I really do hope you guys take up NordVPN on their generous offer, and without further ado, let's begin. My parents live next door to a small red house. Our backyard faces the side of their house, which has a deck and 2 large windows. Around front there are always at least 3 cars parked outside. Oddly enough, in the 10 years that I've lived there, I never saw anyone enter or leave as well. Once when I was 12, I saw shadows thrown against the far wall that was visible through one of the windows, but that was about it. When my sister moved out, I took her bedroom, a large open converted space in the basement, which had a door and an outdoor stairwell which led to the backyard. The door had a small window on it, which my sister had covered with a Pulp Fiction poster. I redecorated and replaced the poster with some of those sheer half-curtain things. But the way the room was set up is that if I was laying on my bed or sitting on the couch, I was facing the door. When I first moved down there too, I noticed that sometimes at night, I would hear the sounds of leaves crunching in the stairwell. Initially, I chalked it up to my cat, who liked to roam the neighborhood, and I really had no reason to suspect otherwise. That is, till a few weeks later. So one night, when my parents were away on business, my boyfriend and I were sitting on the couch just smoking, and suddenly he got really stiff and was just staring at the window. I asked him what was wrong, and then he said, I think I just saw a camera flash. I kind of just laughed it off and ended up just chalking it up to him being high. I mean, who would want a picture of 2 people getting stoned? Still, the seeds of paranoia had been sown, and it wasn't easy to get settled down for sleep that night. I kept looking at the gap between the curtains. There was no light at the bottom of the stairs, so if someone really was down there, I would be none the wiser. But at around 3, I heard the distinct sound of leaves under heavy boots. Definitely not a cat this time. I don't know what made me decide the best course of action was for me, standing all of 5'3" to confront a potential stalker myself. I didn't even put shoes on, but I threw the door open and there was no one in the stairwell. So I ran up the stairs and into the backyard, and standing there was a man in his mid-40s, maybe 6 feet tall and wearing one of those mechanic jumpsuits. He was holding a clunky, outdated digital camera. We stood there for a second just sort of looking at each other. He seemed confused to see me, but after what felt like a long time, I remembered how to speak, and I said, "What are you doing?" My voice seemed to startle him, and he immediately turned and ran through my backyard towards the red house and into the dark. After that too, I didn't see any strange flashes of light or hear any crunchy leaf noises or anything. But it definitely really freaks me out to think about just how many nights he could have just been standing there in the dark, watching me. So, I'm officially freaked out and have come to the conclusion that this saga surrounding my dog is no longer just innocent. I lived in the same apartment for 5 years from 2014 to 2019. Around Christmas of 2017, I left my apartment to find a cute dog collar on my doormat. It had tags on it still and was clearly new. I have a beautiful sweet Great Dane who frequented the apartment dog park with me, so I assumed that one of the people that we always play with got it for her. I kept it and used it, but never did find out who left it. Flash forward to sometime around my March birthday in 2018, a big bag of Sizzlers dog treats, my dog's favourite, were on my porch chair. I knew that I hadn't left them there. I thought again, well, that was really nice. Just someone doing the right thing. But I'm sort of crazy protective of my dog, so I actually threw the bag away since I didn't know their origin. Around August 2018, another surprise showed up on the porch, this time a stuffed lamb chop toy, a dog cookie, like you'd get at the pet store, and a small bag of my dog's food. Now, at the time I fed my dog Origin, so even the small bag was really expensive. And I thought that this was super weird. I began telling people at the office and the dog park and asking my neighbours if they'd seen anything. Nothing, and nobody else had any other experiences like it. Again though, I got a bag of treats around January of 2019. This time I was just fed up though, so I left a sign on my sliding glass door that said I appreciated the gesture, but to stop leaving gifts, and I put a second camera inside facing the patio as well. And nothing happened after that. Sometime around then, though, I had left my dog's favourite stuffed toy dinosaur on my front door mat as we came in from the park because it was covered in mud. I went to get it later to clean it, and it was just gone. I was sure that somebody threw it out since we had people that collected our trash from bins at the front door, and I noticed that they had come by. But me and my dog moved into my fiance's house about 50 minutes away in October of last year. I always thought it was just a weird neighborhood kid or a shy person or an old person from the senior living place across the street or something, and eventually I forgot about it. That is, until about an hour ago. So I came home on my break to eat, I work third shift, and I let my dog and my fiance's dog out the back, when I noticed that on the stairs to the door, there's the dinosaur toy, still muddy, and it has the same ripped tail propped up against the glass. I immediately shut the dogs in the house and go and look around, but there's nothing. Keep in mind, I left at 11:50 p.m. and there was no toy. I came home at around 3:45 a.m. and it was there. So in that short middle of the night time frame, someone jumped my 5-foot fence, it locks and was still locked, placed the toy and just left. Not to mention too that they had to have found my new address, which is not listed anywhere, and I didn't leave forwarding addresses with the apartment complex. I put the toy in a trash bag and it's in my garage now. I put a call into the non-emergency police line and they said that they'd send someone today to take a report, but I can tell you that I'm officially freaked out now. I'm not letting my dog out of my sight. Update. So, I wanted to let everyone know that I have 8 cameras on the way from Amazon that will arrive tomorrow, and I'll set it up as soon as they get here. I also have our indoor Arlo camera that we usually use to check on the dogs when we're gone, facing out from my front window towards the driveway, with the motion detector on for now. I've also informed every neighbour that I have, talked to the police, and I've let all my friends and family know. I also scoured my backyard for any weird treats or footprints, and I didn't find anything. My neighbour actually had some old barbed wire in his shed as well, so he helped me put a strip of it along the inside top of my fence so that if someone reached up and tried to climb over, that they wouldn't see it, but they sure as heck would feel it. I also have a shotgun next to my bed with me, not loaded obviously, but it's the pump kind that makes a very loud, distinct and scary noise. I also checked the toy thoroughly by cutting it open to check for wires or cameras or anything, and I even used a magnet to find any metal in the stuffing, and it was clean. I'm keeping it in the bag in the garage in case anything happens, though. And I guess I just want to thank you guys for your help to try and figure out who this person is and what they could be up to. I'll also continue to update you guys if anything happens. Update. So, some good news, guys. The cameras that I got fully worked. Last night at around 9 PM, a truck pulled up into my driveway and slowly backs out and turns around once my new driveway spotlight comes on. It's caught on my new Blink camera, and looking at the video, I actually recognized the truck instantly. It was the maintenance tech guy from my old apartment complex. He had a beat-up black extended cab truck for as long as I lived there, and the tailgate was completely missing and had one white panel on the back where it had been repaired or something. I know that he lived or lives at the complex, so there's probably no reason for the coincidence. But I instantly called the detective who I spoke with and told him, and they told me that they would go and speak with him today. Now, I've got to say though that I kind of feel a bit sad about this. This guy was always just super nice to me and my dog, and I knew from conversations with him and the office ladies that he has decreased mental capacity since birth and that he's slow with very little social skills. I don't think that he was trying to be malicious at all, but I'm pretty torn up about it, honestly. I had so many interactions with him over the time that I lived there, and all were so pleasant, and I knew that he had very little social skills. He once told me, in fact, that I was the one and only nice person to him there. I sort of know that that's probably true as well, because I heard many residents complain about the retard maintenance guy and how they should get better for what they pay. And he loved my dog, always made it a habit to stop and pet her and whatnot. I told the detective all of this and that he was slow when I called, but I don't know. I just feel very conflicted. What do you guys think? Update. So, the detective just gave me a call, guys. He sent an officer to talk to the guy at the complex. At first he said he didn't know what they were talking about, but then after being showed the video evidence, said that he just turned around in the driveway and had no idea who it was. That he was just driving around. He also denied leaving any gifts ever. The detective said too that he had a clean background and that they couldn't get him on any charges and yada yada yada. But I guess that's don't feel as bad after he denied everything. I'm gonna stay vigilant for sure, but I guess at least now he knows that I have cameras and that I'm watching. A little bit of backstory first. So I had just finished high school and had recently turned 18 when all of this occurred. I was looking forward to starting university and was going to be moving out of my parents' house into student housing closer to campus. As a result, I started looking for a job closer to my residence. I found one about 5 minutes walk from where I was going to be living, and it was honestly perfect for me. I was to be a barista in a tiny little coffee kiosk in one of the cooler streets in the city. This street was sort of known for prostitution and drugs, but it was also super popular as it hosted some of the most interesting events and also contained some of the nicest thrift stores in the city. But what was even more ideal about my new job, though, was the fact that I worked right across the road from my best friend, and her name was Phoebe. At the time, Phoebe was in love with her job. She was actively being given more responsibilities, and she was being promised the world by her employers. Many of these promises turned out to be false at the time, but that's another story. So, during one of her shifts though, Phoebe was approached by a man who had seemingly become a regular at the place that she was working, and his name was Richard. He told her that if she ever wanted to leave a job, he had just become the manager of a new restaurant, a little ways down the road, and Phoebe kindly denied his offer. He approached her several more times with this same offer before she recommended him our other close friend. Her name was Mia. Mia was sort of hesitant to take the position at first because she has a passionate hatred for hospitality and greatly prefers retail, but she did need the extra money at the time, and so she ended up taking the job. The day that Mia was signing a contract too, Phoebe and I both finished work early, around 4, so he told Mia that we would meet her at a new job once we finished and that we would go do something afterwards. Phoebe and I went to the cake shop next door and sat outside at work while we waited for Mia. And when they finished, Richard followed Mia outside to come and say hello to Phoebe. The girls introduced him to me and the conversations ensued, and he honestly seemed like a pretty friendly guy, if not a little bit awkward. He was late 30s, early 40s, bird-like in appearance, quite short, balding, larger in size, and he seemed really greasy, if that's the right way to put it. As the conversation continued, though, I began to tease Mia a little bit, as friends do. I saw no harm in it, as she was one of my best friends, and she had made a similar joke at my expense prior to this interaction. But Richard's demeanor suddenly seemed to sort of just switch. He became somewhat catty and defensive of Mia. He retorted back that if I was going to be mean to his staff, that he would bar me from every store on the street that he worked on. This seemed ridiculous, but he claimed to be friends with a security guard that worked on the street. Fortunately, I was actually friends with this man too, and when I asked him about it, he told me that he'd never heard of a Richard before. Richard said these things to me as though he was joking, but he was so persistent about it that I got incredibly uncomfortable and honestly was almost in tears at one point. It was from this interaction too that he nicknamed me Trouble. I also feel it needs to be noted that he didn't scold Mia or Phoebe at all for the same behavior. Phoebe sensed my discomfort, though, and told him that we had to leave as we had plans. I flash forward a few weeks, though, and Phoebe and I decided to go to see Mia at work again. Richard intrudes that conversation yet again, and again he singles me out from the group, teasing me and only referring to me as Trouble. This time I just sort of play along, as I can tell it isn't going to stop. He asks Mia if she's after another job, as he needs someone to clean his home and lives all the way out where my parents and Mia live. Mia tells him that she can't, as she has too many responsibilities, but I tell him that I might know a few people in the area that might do it, and I give him my phone number. But Richard takes this as a sign that I've agreed to do it, and begins texting me insistently about setting up a meeting. Now, this man is much older than me and lives alone in a rural area. So suddenly my instincts kicked in and I try to get out of it by telling him that I can't drive, but he says that he can pick me up from the nearest train station. Now, I know that this might sound silly, but I don't want to come across as impolite or have my best friend's boss resent her because of me, so I make the mistake of agreeing. However, I tell him that my sister will be helping me as she's looking for a part-time job and my dad will be dropping me off. I do this in order to have some backup and so that my dad knows my whereabouts. But Richard goes on to complain about how I don't trust him and claims that his house is very small and the $100 he's going to pay me won't be enough to split with my sister. I tell him, though, that I just want to provide her with some work experience, and finally he agrees, asking how old she is. My sister is 17. Richard and I finally find a time, though, that I'm not working to schedule a meeting. This meeting is held at his place of work, and I feel a lot more comfortable sitting in the main restaurant, surrounded by people, as I thought that he was going to hold the meeting in an office. We begin talking about the responsibilities of the job. He tells me that it'll be basic things like tidying up, vacuuming, the usual stuff. I agree, and he then goes on to tell me how he'll also be expecting me to do his laundry. I think that this is a little bit odd, as he's only paying a small amount for such a large job, but he assures me that his house is small and that it's not messy, but continuously claims it just needs a woman's touch. I nod and ignore the fact that this grown man thinks that just because he's a man, it means that he doesn't need to know how to maintain his own home, which in hindsight is weird, I know. But this is where things start to get a little creepy. So near the end of the meeting, he asks me again how old my sister is, and when I say 17, his face drops. He then starts telling me about how he previously posted this ad on Craigslist, and this 60-year-old woman replied offering to do it in her lingerie. He tells me how he didn't even ask for that in the ad, but she offered and he was put off completely. He then proceeds to tell me that he would be willing to pay more to someone between the ages of 18 to 30, if they're willing to do that, but he would never request that because, well, he's not a pervert. I called him out on this one and tell him then and there that this meeting is done and I have to go and get Phoebe. He asks if he made me uncomfortable, and yes, he did, but I just say no and that I'll get back to him. This strange man, who I've only met 3 times, remember, then attempts to hug me, but I ignore the gesture and awkwardly wave goodbye from less than 3 feet away. I boost it down the street toward Phoebe's work and tell her the whole story. She tells me that I can't do it, and I tell her that I know that, but I don't know how to tell him without risking my own safety or Mia's job. Fortunately, Richard gives me the perfect out, and he texts me later that afternoon telling me that he hopes I'm okay with the cats because, well, he has a small one. And I see this as the perfect opportunity, and lie and tell him that my sister and I are both deathly allergic to cats, and neither of us will be open to doing the job now. Richard accepts this reasoning after a little persuasion, and I think that I'm finally done with him. But unfortunately, that was definitely not the case. Richard proceeded to text me every day, asking if I'm mad at him or if he made me uncomfortable, asking me how my day was and stuff like that. Just behaving like a preteen in a new relationship, basically. And the more I ignored him, the more that he texted. I finally blocked him in March of 2019. This escapade had begun 4 or 5 months prior to this. The blocking still didn't stop him, though. Mia informed me that Richard was no longer going to be working there, as he had to go for surgery and we wouldn't have to see him anymore. See, Richard had not only been harassing me, but Mia and Phoebe too, just to a lesser extent. One Saturday morning, while I was working, setting up at around 7:45 in the morning, Richard actually showed up at my work. The divider was down as we were closed, so he came and stood in the doorway, the only exit that I had available to me at the time. He started asking me why I was ignoring him and telling me about his surgery. I told him that he wasn't allowed to stand there as it was a fire exit, but he didn't budge. Fortunately, though, my boss showed up shortly after and told Richard that he was going to phone the security if he didn't move. Recognizing the sheer look of fear on my face as well, my boss was sort of a jerk on most days, but man, was I grateful for him that morning. Now, roughly a month after that experience, I honestly thought that Richard was gone from my life. I was living in my new apartment, Mia was around all the time and loved her job without Richard there. Things were going pretty well for us. One morning, though, after a night of drinking, me and the flatmates became peckish. I decided to order us some greasy food from a delivery app, and lo and behold, who was our delivery driver other than Richard? I turned to my boyfriend at the time and tell him that he has to go and collect the food. He doesn't understand, but Mia assures him that it's really important. So he agrees and goes out to collect it. But Richard is not driving the vehicle that he claims to be driving on the app, and at first we're sort of confused as the number plate is also different. Mia and I watch from his bedroom window, and the interaction takes much longer than expected. He comes back though, and we ask what took him so long. He tells us that Richard apparently refused to give him the food until he could prove that he was my boyfriend. Apparently, he recognized my name from the app, and now he knew where I lived, which was definitely a concern. But Mia and I tell my flatmates the story of what happened, and we all agree it's a good idea to go to my RA. The RA reports it to upper management, and they say that they can't really do anything about it, but if he does come in again, to call their security. A few months go by, and there's no more Richard sightings, until I order from the same app again, and yet again, Richard is our driver, also in a different car again. So I send my boyfriend to go and collect the food again and report the incident to my RA again, and the food delivery app. I know that I was stupid in not immediately reporting it to campus security, as I had much more proof of the creepy behavior than he had of his innocence, but I was naive and I didn't want my parents to find out at the time, so I just didn't do it. Fortunately, I haven't seen Richard since then, but what do you guys think? Do you think it was just a mere coincidence that he ended up being our delivery driver? Or do you guys think that there's more to this? I went to high school in a small Minnesota town, mostly farmland intersected by wood areas, and of course dozens of small lakes. One side of my neighborhood was bordered by a relatively large marshland that you could access by a slope that wound down to a trail. This trail curved through the marsh into a big patch of woods about 3/4 of a mile away. In the fall and the springtime after heavy rains, a fog would often settle over the marsh as it was so much lower than the surrounding area, and it truly looked like something out of a Stephen King novel, let me tell you. Anyway, after one of these rains, my brother and I, he was probably 13 and I was 16, decided that it would be a great idea to go explore the woods in the fog. Although the sun was setting fast, we knew that we could make it to the woods in about 10 minutes if we left immediately. We grabbed a couple of flashlights, knowing that it was probably going to be dark by the time that we got home, and we headed for the trail. Once we were in the trail and moving, it sort of hit us just how thick the fog was. We had only been walking for a minute or two, but we had absolutely no visibility behind us, and 5 or 10 feet max in front of us. We continued walking for a few more minutes, just sort of messing around about hearing noises and seeing red eyes in the distance the whole time, until we came to a curve in the trail. This particular curve signaled that we were only about 100 yards from the entrance to the woods, and at this point there's a small lake on the left side of the trail and miles of marshland on the right. It's important to note that we've moved farther and farther away from any houses. Our house was the closest to the trail, and the trail moved far away from our neighborhood rather than bordering any backyards. But we began walking past the lake, and then we heard a splash. Definitely larger than a fish jumping as well, but we had no idea what else would have been out there to make that noise. So we just sort of stopped, waited, and upon hearing nothing else, just continued on our way. We couldn't have been going for more than 15 seconds when we heard cracking and shuffling in the brush up ahead to our left. We stopped dead in our tracks and waited, and then at the end of our eyesight, which could have only been about 10 feet away, a figure stepped out from the brush bordering the lake. The fog was way too thick to make out many details, but it must have been at least 6'4" and very broad-shouldered. As the figure made its way into the middle of the trail, my brother gasped, and then it stopped. Its head shot over and looked right at us and just sort of stared. It felt like an eternity, but it couldn't have been more than a few seconds. And I don't know why, but I felt true terror in that moment, and I've never replicated that feeling again. I began to take a small step backwards, and suddenly the figure took off running into the marshland. And when I say quickly, I mean there's nothing on this planet that can move that quickly. Again, there are no houses or buildings or anything for miles in the direction that it ran as well. But suffice it to say, my brother and I sprinted back to the house faster than we've ever run. I still don't know what, or perhaps even who, I saw that day. But to be honest, I kinda hope that I never do. So some friends and I used to drink in this really old, abandoned, dilapidated farmhouse that was about a half an hour walk out of our hometown. It was a place that we could just drink and chill all night and not have to worry about cops and stuff like that. Although the house itself was a bit dangerous, I'll admit. It was ready to collapse for sure, but we didn't mind. We always sat on the top floor as it had the least amount of debris and had a nice wide open area where we could all sit in a circle. We'd bring a flashlight, but we'd turn it off once we got up in our little area upstairs, just in case someone happened to drive by and notice something suspicious might be happening. Although, not even once did a car drive by, like ever, on any night that we were there. And if they did, it would have been very noticeable, as it was miles away from any light sources and was dead quiet, other than the crickets chirping. But anyway, one night, I'm pretty sure it was a Saturday, probably around 2 or 3 in the morning or so, a group of 7 or 8 of us, we hear the door open and some chatter. We're like, oh no, and quickly hid our booze, sat as still and quiet as we could, and hoped that they just wouldn't come upstairs. But they did. But this is where it gets really weird. Now, although it was dark with no lights, we could easily see each other across the room. And this Hutterite family, they're sort of like the Amish folk, all basically wear the same style of clothes and live in colonies and farms, that comes walking up the stairs. They were chatting to each other, but it wasn't in English. I think it might have been German maybe, but I really can't say. Except the two little girls, I would guess around 6 or 7, they were speaking in English to each other. They came into the open room that we were in and started looking around. We were basically soiling our pants at this point. I mean, there's no way that they wouldn't be able to see us all just sitting there in a circle. But somehow, they didn't. In fact, they sort of looked right at us, but through us. Like we didn't even exist. In fact, at one point, one of the little girls was standing right in front of me, and she said excitedly, "This is going to be my bedroom." We were all just sort of sitting there frozen solid, looking at each other like, is this really happening? They continued to kind of just walk around and look at stuff. It seemed like they were checking out a new house that they were going to move into or something. But if you saw the state of this house, then you would know 100% that this was never going to be the case. It was way beyond repair of any stage. But they walked around for like 10 minutes just sort of chatting away, seemingly completely oblivious to us, and again, there is just no way that they wouldn't be able to see us. But finally, they walked back down the stairs. We heard the door open and shut, and then silence. No vehicle driving away, nothing, just crickets again. We were all like, what the heck just happened? Where did they even go? A few of us decide to quickly investigate, so we go down the stairs with our trusty flashlight, go outside, and there's just nothing. No vehicle, no tire tracks in the gravel road, no people, just nothing. Mind you, this wasn't even a minute after we heard the door shut, and if they were on foot, they wouldn't have made it that far, and this was flat open prairie grassland. You can see for miles in any direction. So we would have definitely been able to see them without a doubt. Key points too that make this event even stranger is that this house was miles away from any other house. There was no vehicle, and it was like we weren't even there. We looked sketchy, seriously. We had mohawks, tattoos, piercings all over our faces, leather jackets with nails and stuff sticking out of them, etc. There's just no way that you wouldn't see us in the abandoned house at that time of night and just react in fear. Also, it was like 3 in the morning. Why the heck would you walk on foot with young children to come and check out an old dilapidated farmhouse at that time of night without even a flashlight? I really don't know what to think of it, to be honest. I mean, we all saw them and they were definitely there and they seemed real. That house is still there as well, but it's basically sideways now from the wind. There's no way anyone in their right mind was going to try and fix it up, let me tell you. And it's been over 20 years, and everyone who was there is still scratching their heads.